Hi, I won in court today. It's a very fulfilling thing to have that kind of end result to this whole little affair. But I have to admit, you know, while technically I was triumphant, I didn't really win because I didn't even have to say anything, which I guess was kind of cool. I probably prefer that, although I had plenty to say. I didn't need to open my mouth. I'm glad to say that this court case was won, but it wasn't as a result of much proactivity on my part because they just dropped the case. The charges were dropped. The case was dismissed because there was insufficient evidence to prosecute, aka there was no crime. Matter of fact, the arresting charging officer did not show up. It was just the state's attorney, or the state's assistant attorney, who had a lovely little mustache for a young lady. Anyhow, she was just doing her job, I guess. And she wasn't probably much older than me. Matter of fact, she probably was like 5 or 6 years younger than me. She was just doing her job. But she was the only one to speak for the case, and she had to null prosit, or null proseque, or QE, or some Latin term for no prosecution, or we can't prosecute, or we can't move forward, there's no evidence, you win, Craig. So that was cool, and it was a bit of weight off my shoulders because I'm sick of having to think about it and go through it, and this is evidence to me that the arresting officer / officers in this whole shebang knew from the word go that there was no crime being committed. They had no lawful excuse to detain me, arrest me, search me, question me, do anything to me that they did. But they did it, and my firm belief is because I claimed my rights. I was willing to stand there with them, toe-to-toe, on equal ground, and ask questions and claim my rights. And these cops have been trained to not perform on equal ground with the public that they're supposed to serve. They're lucky to be treated on equal ground. They should be treated on a lower standard than we, the people, are, because they are the servants of the public. We do not serve them. But it's been perverted for so long from the academy level up that they believe it. I was talking to my brother-in-law about this. Not really my brother-in-law, but it's my brother's brother-in-law. So I guess by proxy it's my brother-in-law. But he is a police officer here in the same city where I was arrested. But he's a city cop, not a county cop. And the county cops are the ones that arrested me. Anyways, he told me that, a lot of corruption exists in a much more horrific way than what I experienced. Mine was just a little example of what really goes on, and he was very honest in explaining to me that it is much, much worse, and that it isn't right, and he agrees with it. But he said, look, I'm a little cog in the machine. We're trained from the academy. We're so stressed out from the physical training and the testing to remember all of the constitutional upholding that we're supposed to do and the constitutional understanding that we're supposed to have. It kind of gets obscured by all of the other guidelines that we have to adhere to, all of the other milestones that we have to meet in order to become a police officer. And once they're actually a police officer, it's like just completely lost. And he said, I'm lucky in that regard because it could have been much worse. And he's very apologetic in that sense. And he said he really respected me because, number one, he said most people have no idea what their rights are. He recounted for me what I consider to be horror stories about people that have given up their rights to him so often, about letting him search their car or telling him things that he had no business knowing without their consent, or giving him their name and their ID without having to do it. And they just do it because they don't know their rights. He said, you know your rights, you are willing to stand up and claim it, and you're willing to go sit in jail to stick up for yourself especially when you know the cops are wrong. And you know, these cops, they knew that they were wrong, and that's when I said in one of the first videos how it was apparent to me that they did when once they had me under arrest, the main arresting officer in the elevator was doing her best to provoke me further into giving her a justified reason to take further action against me. When we were in the elevator going down to the police car, I had been completely peaceful, completely passive, just asking questions, standing up for my right. They put me in handcuffs. As they were doing so, I told them I didn't consent. That kind of. Once we got into the elevator, she kept really holding me up against the wall in the elevator. I'm not moving a muscle. I'm giving absolutely no resistance at all, and she kept intermittently pushing up against me as if to like piss me off and get me riled up so she could justify tasing me or something. It was all about not being able to handle getting questioned by one of the terrorists, quote unquote. You know, it's like they're taught in the academy that the people in the public are not to be trusted. We're the bad guys and we're out to get the cops. Not that they're there to protect us. Those cops did not show up there to resolve any issue. They showed up there to do whatever they could to escalate it to the point of creating a justified action that would create basically commerce in the courts. When I was sitting there in that court today, I will admit that I happened to be in a courtroom with an American flag that was not surrounded in golden fringe, which told me, at least by that standard, I wasn't in a maritime admiralty jurisdiction. However, everything that went on there was about commerce, the exchange of money. It had nothing to do with right and wrong. Matter of fact, they left me to almost the very last person on the docket, probably for a good reason. But I watched 20 people go before me, and it was all about fines and fees, fines and fees, fines and fees. Not you're right, you're wrong, this is how it should go, preservation of privacy and rights, and what's good and everything like that. It was all about cha-ching. And it was very evident in as clear of a way as it's ever been. And I felt privileged in that regard. It was very weird. And they did try to pull tricks on me. You know, when you first go to the courtroom, you're supposed to like check in with the state's attorney. The cops do it, the lawyers do it, and if you're there as a defendant, in all capital letters, you're supposed to check in. So I did, and I give her my name. I say, here's my name. She checked the folder, and she says to me, well, since you have no prior convictions, we're going to go ahead and enter a nolle prosequi, which is going to be contingent on you doing 24 hours of community service. Is that something that you'd be interested in? I said, hang on a second here, miss. Are you trying to contract with me here privately prior to court? I said, no. We're only going to discuss this when it's for and on the record in court, not here privately between you and me. We'll discuss that when court's in session. And I don't think anybody's ever said that to her. Well, that's the impression I got out of her reaction, because she said, okay, all right, just have a seat. And it was a little weird to get asked that. She was offering me something. And there was absolutely no benefit to me. It was a benefit to them, free labor. So they tried to sneak in some free labor out of me, even though they were going to do a nolle pros, which says, as per my understanding, look, we're entering this nolle pros because there's insufficient evidence to prosecute. Yet, because I was so cunning and deceptive prior to court, I contracted verbally here with the defendant. He said he's willing to do some free volunteer work for us. Okay. No, wasn't going to happen. Matter of fact, when I did get called up to there, or the corporation got called up to court, I didn't bother playing the name game or anything like this. Since this was a criminal offense, I didn't have an attorney, and I knew that it was going to get thrown out likely. I played the game a little bit. Not the name game, but I went along with it. All right? And when they called the corporation, I went up there with a definite air about me. I walked up there very methodically, very slowly, not with a chip on my shoulder, but with my head high, like a sovereign person would. And I was up there maybe 10 seconds before State's assistant attorney was saying,